In the 41st millennium, there is only war. But war has rules, immutable laws forged in 10,000 years of blood and survival. The Imperium knows its enemies, Xenos abominations, heretical traitors, demonic incursions from the warp. They have protocols for everything. Contingencies stacked upon contingencies. Prayers for every possible damnation. They had no protocol for Wanda Maximoff. The sky above Hive Tertius broke first. Not shattered, broke, like glass struck at precisely the wrong angle. Reality itself developing fracture lines that spiderwebbed across the atmosphere. The industrial smog that perpetually choked the Hive world's upper spires began to shimmer. Colors that had no name bleeding through the cracks. Crimson and black, threaded with impossible silver light. Then she fell. Wanda Maximoff tumbled through dimensions she didn't understand, pursued by grief that had finally consumed everything. The Darkhold's whispers still echoed in her mind, promises of children who never existed, of a life stolen by a universe that refused to let her be happy. She'd torn through the barriers between realities searching for them, for Billy and Tommy, for vision, for anything that wasn't the hollow ache in her chest. Instead, she found hell. The impact crater was 300 meters wide. Rockcrete and plasteel melted into glass at the edges, glowing with residual energy that made nearby tech priests' augmetic eyes spark and fail. Wanda lay at the center, her Scarlet Witch uniform torn and scorched, red energy still crackling weakly around her fingers. She was unconscious. The city was not. "Mommy?" A child's voice. Wanda's eyes snapped open to find a small girl standing at the crater's edge, except the girl was translucent, flickering like a broken pict screen. The child wore rags that might have been a factory worker's uniform. Soot covered her face. "Mommy, you came back!" Wanda pushed herself upright, every muscle screaming. The air tasted wrong, thick with chemicals and something else, something that made her skin crawl. "I'm not... Who are you?" More figures emerged from the ruins. Dozens, then hundreds, all translucent, all flickering. Factory workers, soldiers, families, an entire population rendered into ghosts by her arrival. They reached toward her with desperate hope, speaking names she didn't know, pleading for salvation from deaths already claimed. "No," Wanda whispered, red light beginning to pulse around her hands. "No, no, no, I didn't mean to." The warp had never touched anything like Wanda Maximoff's power before. Her reality manipulation, forged in the Mind Stone and amplified by the Darkhold, created ripples that the Immaterium seized upon hungrily. Where her energy bled into the material universe, the veil thinned. The dead weren't appearing because she'd killed them. They'd been dead for years, decades, centuries. Her power was simply showing them, pulling memories of the deceased from the warp itself and giving them momentary form. She was making the Imperium's brutal history visible. "Witch!" The voice boomed across the crater, amplified by voxcasters. Wanda spun to see armored figures advancing through the smoke. Soldiers in flak armor, laser guns raised, faces hidden behind rebreather masks. Their weapons glowed with ready charge packs. Behind them, something larger moved. Power armor, she realized, but nothing like Tony Stark's elegant designs. This was a walking cathedral, 8 feet of ceramite plating covered in purity seals and devotional scripture. The Space Marine's helmet lenses glowed red in the haze. "Stand down!" The Marine's voice was a processed growl. "You are in violation of the Emperor's peace. Surrender yourself to his judgment." Wanda raised her hands defensively, red energy swirling. "I don't want to fight. I don't even know where I am." "Psyker!" One of the guardsmen fired. The last bolt struck Wanda's hastily erected hex barrier and dissipated into harmless light. More shots followed, a dozen lass beams converging on her position. The fear and confusion that had paralyzed her since arrival crystallized into something familiar: survival instinct. Wanda's eyes flared crimson. Reality twisted. The guardsmen's laser guns transformed into bouquets of black roses. Their flak armor became aged parchment that crumbled at a touch. The Space Marine charged, and Wanda threw out her hand, probability itself bending as the warrior's ankle joint suddenly seized, ancient mechanisms failing at the worst possible moment. He crashed face first into the rockcrete. "I said, I don't want to fight," Wanda shouted. But even as she spoke, she felt it, something vast and hungry stirring in response to her power. The air grew colder. The ghostly figures around her began to warp, their pleading faces stretching into rictus grins. The Space Marine climbed to his feet with impossible speed. "Chaos Witch," he snarled. "You reek of the warp." The what? More soldiers were coming. Wanda could hear engines, see contrails of approaching aircraft. Whatever authority these people represented, she just declared war on it by defending herself. The old panic rose. Sokovia, the Accords, Westview. Every time she tried to help, she only made things worse. The ghostly child still stood nearby, but now its eyes had turned black. When it spoke, dozens of voices emerged. "Join us, witch. Embrace what you truly are." Wanda recoiled. This wasn't her magic going wrong. Something was actively responding to it, trying to corrupt it. The sensation was like the Darkhold, but amplified 1,000-fold, an entire dimension of malevolent consciousness pressing against her mind. She did the only thing she could think of. She ran. Red energy erupted around her in a protective cocoon. Wanda launched herself into the air, soaring over the advancing Imperial forces. Below, the Space Marine barked orders into a Vox unit. "Command, this is Brother Sergeant Castiel. Omega level Psyker event in Sector 7-9er. Requesting immediate inquisitorial support. Be advised, target demonstrates unprecedented reality manipulation. Recommend orbital strike if containment fails." Wanda didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Kill order. She flew higher, desperate to escape, to think, to understand what had happened. The Hive City sprawled beneath her, a nightmare landscape of towers that stretched into the polluted sky, each one home to millions packed into conditions that made New York tenements look palatial. Smokestacks belched toxic waste. Massive cannons lined the walls, pointed at a sky that promised only enemies. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't any reality she'd visited. This was something else entirely. And then she felt it, a psychic scream so vast it nearly knocked her from the sky. Billions of minds, all crying out in worship and fear and desperate faith towards something distant. The Astronomicon, though she had no name for it yet. The psychic beacon that guided humanity through hell itself. Her power resonated with it, amplified it, distorted it. For just a moment, every psyker within 1,000 light-years felt an impossible presence. A witch whose power could rewrite reality itself, falling into a universe where reality was already broken. In the warp, things older than human civilization took notice. Wanda Maximoff had arrived in Warhammer 40,000, and nothing would ever be the same. Wanda had been running for 6 hours when the black ship found her. She'd taken refuge in the Underhive, miles beneath the industrial sprawl where even the Imperium's endless surveillance lost track of individual souls. Down here, the air was thick enough to chew, recycled through ancient scrubbers that barely functioned. Neon signs flickered in languages she couldn't read, advertising services she didn't want to understand. The people who shuffled through the darkness were hollow-eyed and broken, too exhausted by survival to care about one more lost soul. Wanda sat in the corner of what might have been a bar, her uniform concealed under a stolen worker's cloak. Her hands shook as she tried to process everything. The soldiers, the giant in power armor, the voices that had spoken through the dead child, promising corruption with such casual certainty. And worst of all, the feeling that her magic was wrong here. Every time she'd used her power, something had responded. Not the familiar crackle of hex energy, but something vast and sentient lurking just beyond perception. It felt like using the Darkhold, except she hadn't opened any cursed book. Her power itself seemed to be a doorway. "You're not from around here." Wanda's head snapped up. The woman standing before her was tall and severe, dressed in black armor that seemed to absorb light. A stylized eye marked her breastplate. Inquisition, Wanda's mind supplied, though she didn't know how she knew. The woman's face was scarred, one eye replaced with a red augmetic lens that whirred as it focused. "How did you find me?" Wanda asked, red energy already gathering at her fingertips beneath the table. "I didn't find you," the Inquisitor said calmly, sliding into the seat across from her. "I followed the ripples. Every time you use your power, you tear holes in reality. The warp bleeds through. 3 separate demon manifestations in your wake, minor ones, easily contained, but concerning nonetheless." She paused. "You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?" Wanda's silence was answer enough. The Inquisitor leaned back, studying her with that mechanical eye. "Interesting. Your psychic signature is unlike anything in Imperial records. No indication of navigator genetics, no signs of sanctioned training, and your power output." She tapped a data slate on the table. "My throne-damned sensors thought you were a nascent warp rift." "I'm not trying to cause problems," Wanda said quietly. "I just want to go home." "Where is home?" "I don't know anymore." The admission hurt more than Wanda expected. Not here. Somewhere else. Another reality, maybe. I was trying to find my children and She stopped, unwilling to explain the full scope of her desperation to this stranger. The Inquisitor's expression softened fractionally. I am Inquisitor Kyra Vex of the Ordo Hereticus. My duty is to root out corruption, to protect humanity from threats both external and internal. By every law of the Imperium, I should have executed you the moment I tracked you here. She leaned forward. But I've spent 40 years hunting witches, and I've never encountered one who transmutes Imperial war gear into flowers. I didn't want to hurt them, Wanda protested. Precisely my point. Vex's augmetic eye whirred again. A true chaos-corrupted psyker would have reveled in slaughter. You neutralized threats without killing. Inefficient by Imperial standards, but it suggests restraint, control. She paused. Or perhaps ignorance of what you truly are. I know what I am. I'm the Scarlet Witch. Scarlet. Vex's remaining human eye widened slightly. Your magic. You call it chaos magic, don't you? The question hung in the air like a blade. Wanda nodded slowly. Vex stood abruptly. Come with me. Now. We're not safe here. I'm not going anywhere with... The explosion ripped through the underhive bar with devastating force. Wanda's hex shield activated on instinct. A crimson bubble of warped probability that deflected shrapnel and flame. Through the smoke, she saw them. Cultists wearing robes marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Their flesh warped by mutations. 8 pointed stars carved into their foreheads. They chanted in a language that made Wanda's teeth ache. Witch, blessed by the changer of ways, join us in glorious transformation. Tsench worshippers, Vex spat, drawing a bolt pistol that looked almost comically oversized. They've been tracking you too. Of course they have. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each bolt exploding inside a cultist's chest cavity. More poured in from the shadows, dozens of them, eyes glowing with unnatural light. Some wielded autoguns, others crackling warp lightning from bare hands. A few had extra limbs. Or mouths where mouths shouldn't be, or skin that shifted colors like oil on water. They want to recruit you, Vex shouted over the chaos. The Chaos Gods always want powerful psychers. You're a prize beyond measure. One cultist leveled a staff at Wanda, and she felt it. A psychic assault, memories of Westview forced to the surface. Vision dying. Billy and Tommy fading. Her own voice echoing. I don't understand this power, but I will. No! Wanda's power erupted outward in a wave of crimson energy. Reality rewrote itself in a 10-meter radius. Cultists became statues of salt that crumbled to dust. Weapons transformed into writhing serpents that bit their former wielders. The very walls of the underhive shifted into fractals that folded in on themselves. And then Wanda felt it. Them. The presence she'd sensed before, but now undeniable. Vast intelligences in the warp, drawn to her power like moths to flame. One laughed with the voices of infinite schemers. Another whispered promises of sensation beyond mortal comprehension. A third roared with mindless rage. The fourth was silent, patient, and it terrified her most of all. They're watching me, Wanda gasped, clutching her head. Gods or demons or both, neither. The ruinous powers. Vex grabbed Wanda's arm. We need to leave, now, before... The air split open. A demon materialized in the center of the bar. A horror of impossible geometry and shifting flesh, with too many eyes and a beak that spoke words in backwards cascades. A herald of Tzeentch, minor by demonic standards, but more than sufficient to slaughter everyone present. Witch child, it croaked in a voice like breaking mirrors. The architect extends his hand. Your chaos magic is already ours. Accept your destiny. Wanda stared at the creature, at its reality-bending form that existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. And she understood, with horrible clarity, what the Inquisitor had been trying to tell her. Her chaos magic, the power she'd named herself, the abilities she'd inherited from the Mind Stone and amplified through the Darkhold. It resonated with this, with the warp, with entities that thrived on change and mutation and the rewriting of reality. She'd been touching this power all along. She just hadn't known what it truly was. No, Wanda said softly, then louder. No! She thrust both hands forward, and reality screamed. The demon exploded into probability, simultaneously existing and not existing, banished and present, alive and dead, until the contradictions tore it apart. The backlash sent psychic shockwaves through the underhive that shattered augmetic implants and caused spontaneous nosebleeds in a half-mile radius. When the light faded, Wanda collapsed to her knees, gasping. Vex stood over her, bolt pistol still raised, expression unreadable. You just banished a demon, the Inquisitor said slowly, using pure reality manipulation. Without calling on the Emperor's protection, without sanctioned techniques, without any understanding of what you were doing. She holstered her weapon. The Ordo Malleus will want to study you. The Mechanicus will want to dissect you, and every chaos cult in the sector will want to corrupt you. Wanda looked up, tears streaming down her face. What do you want? Vex extended a hand. To give you a choice. Come with me willingly. Help me understand what you are, and perhaps, we can find a way to send you home. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to declare you Hereticus Maxima. You'll be hunted by every agent of the Inquisition until you're dead or corrupted. Some choice, Wanda said bitterly. But she took the hand. As Vex pulled her to her feet, the Inquisitor leaned close. For what it's worth, I don't think you're evil. But in the 41st millennium, intentions matter far less than consequences. Your power is a beacon. The warp will never stop reaching for you now. Wanda followed Vex toward the waiting black ship, feeling the weight of infinite eyes upon her soul. The game had only just begun. The black ship was a prison that flew. Wanda had been aboard for 3 days, or what she thought were 3 days. Time felt slippery here, stretched and compressed in ways that made her head ache. The vessel was ancient, its corridors lined with psychic dampeners that hummed with a frequency just below hearing. Null field generators created dead zones where her power flickered and sputtered like a candle in a storm. But they couldn't shut her down completely. Nothing could. Her cell was surprisingly comfortable by Imperial standards. A small chamber with a cot, a waste reclamation unit, and walls covered in scriptures she couldn't read. Inquisitor Vex visited twice daily, always with questions, always probing for information about her origin, her abilities, her intentions. Wanda told her the truth, all of it. Sokovia, the Mind Stone, Vision's death, Westview, the Darkhold, the desperate, reality-breaking search for her children that had torn her from her universe entirely. Vex listened to everything with that unreadable expression, her augmetic eye recording every word. A stone that granted power, the Inquisitor mused during one session. Not unlike the ancient technology my order sometimes uncovers. And this Darkhold, a tome that corrupted through knowledge? She shook her head. You're lucky it didn't turn you into something far worse. It did turn me into something worse, Wanda said quietly. I hurt people, killed people, all because I couldn't let go. Welcome to the Imperium, Vex replied without humor. We're all monsters here. The only question is whether we're monsters in service to humanity's survival or its extinction. On the fourth day, or perhaps the sixth, Wanda couldn't be sure. The whispers began. At first, she thought it was the ship's machinery. The black ship groaned and creaked as it traveled through something Vex called the warp, a hellish dimension that allowed faster-than-light travel at the cost of constant exposure to literal damnation. Geller fields kept the worst of it out, but even through the barriers, Wanda could feel it. The warp was alive. And it knew her name. Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch, reality's sculptor. The voice was silk and poison speaking directly into her mind. Wanda sat up on her cot, red energy instinctively gathering around her fists. Do not be alarmed, child. I am not here to harm you, merely to converse. Get out of my head, Wanda hissed. Your head? Dear thing, you broadcast across dimensions. Your grief, your power, your delicious potential. It screams across the immaterium. I could no more ignore you than ignore a supernova. The air in the cell shimmered. Colors bled through reality, pink and purple and blue, all swirling together into something that approximated a humanoid shape. Not quite present, not quite absent. A projection, Wanda realized. Something speaking to her from the warp itself. The figure coalesced into a beautiful androgynous form, perfect and terrible, with eyes that held infinite depths of experience. Slanesh, Vex had warned her about this one. The Prince of Pleasure. It offers sensation, perfection, the fulfillment of every desire. It's also the most insidious corrupter in the galaxy. The Inquisitor speaks truth, though she cannot understand the full scope of what I offer. The demon's smile was hypnotic. You seek your children. I can feel that longing in every fiber of your being. It defines you, consumes you. You can't give them back to me, Wanda said, though her voice wavered. They were never real. Real? Such a limiting concept. The demon circled her, though it never quite touched the floor. Reality is mutable. You proved that when you created Westview, when you gave form to your desires. In your universe, you lacked the power to make it permanent. Here, with the warp as your canvas and my guidance, you could reshape entire worlds, make them real, make everything real. Wanda's breath caught. The temptation was immediate and overwhelming, to have Billy and Tommy back, to feel Vision's presence again, to unmake the cruelty that had defined her existence. "What's the price?" she asked, because there was always a price, only acceptance of what you are, of what you could become. The demon leaned close, its breath smelling of roses and rot. "Your chaos magic is already born of the warp, sweet witch. You've been drawing from us since the moment your power manifested. Why fight it? Why suffer in isolation when you could embrace the truth?" "That's a lie," Wanda said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. Her power had always been different from the other Avengers, unquantifiable, reality-bending. The Mind Stone had awakened something, yes, but what if it had simply opened a door to something that already existed? What if her magic had always been connected to this nightmare dimension? Not a nightmare child. A realm of infinite possibility. Every desire fulfilled, every dream made manifest. The demon's form shifted, becoming Vision for just a moment, perfect and whole and smiling at her with love in his synthetic eyes. "I could give you this, all of this, forever." "Stop it!" Wanda's power exploded outward, red energy shattering the demon's projection into fragments. Alarms blared throughout the ship. She felt the Geller field strain as her outburst created ripples in the barrier between dimensions. The demon's laughter echoed even as it dispersed. "We have time, Scarlet Witch. Eternity, in fact. And you are so very, very alone." Vex burst into the cell minutes later, flanked by two sisters of battle, armored warrior women with bolters raised and faith blazing in their eyes. They found Wanda huddled in the corner, sobbing, red energy still crackling around her in defensive patterns. "What happened?" Vex demanded. "It spoke to me," Wanda gasped. "One of your chaos gods. It knew exactly what to say, how to hurt me." The Inquisitor's expression darkened. "Which one?" "The beautiful one, the one that promised pleasure." "Slaanesh, of course." Vex dismissed the sisters with a gesture and knelt beside Wanda. "It offered you your heart's desire. Your children, I assume?" Wanda nodded miserably. "And you refused. The price would have been my soul." "Yes." Vex was quiet for a moment, then spoke with surprising gentleness. "The ruinous powers are very good at finding the cracks in our armor. They've had millions of years to perfect the art of corruption. The fact that you resisted at all is remarkable." "It said my power comes from them," Wanda whispered. From the warp. Is that true? Vex stood, pacing the small cell. I don't know. Your abilities predate your arrival here, which suggests an independent origin. But reality manipulation, probability alteration, the restructuring of matter and energy, these are all aspects of warpcraft. It's possible that in your universe, you were accessing something similar to the immaterium without realizing it. So I've been a monster all along. No. Vex's voice was sharp. Power is not inherently corrupt. A knife can cut bread or cut throats. The intent of the wielder determines its nature. The warp is no different. Our own psychers draw upon it daily in service to the Emperor. What matters is discipline, control, and most importantly, denying the ruinous powers any foothold in your soul. How? Wanda looked up, desperate. How do I fight something that knows my every weakness? Before Vex could answer, the ship lurched violently. More alarms screamed to life. A Vox unit on the Inquisitor's belt crackled with panicked voices. Breach in Sector 9. Geller field fluctuation. Demons. Multiple contacts. Vex's face went pale. No, not here. Not on a black ship. Wanda felt it too, a tearing sensation as something forced its way through the psychic barriers. Not Slanesh this time. Something else. Something that radiated endless ambition and change. A voice boomed through the corridors, speaking in 1,000 overlapping tones. Scarlet Witch, the architect of fate extends his invitation. Your reality-shaping power is wasted on these corpse worshippers. Tzinch offers knowledge, transformation, the truth behind your magic. The cell walls began to shift, geometry becoming non-Euclidean. Wanda saw corridors that led in impossible directions, stairs that climbed down while ascending, doorways that opened into their own interiors. It's inside the ship, Vex said grimly, drawing her bolt pistol. The Lord of Change himself has taken interest in you. This is worse than I feared. Wanda stood on shaking legs, red energy forming around her hands. What do we do? We survive. Vex met her eyes. And you prove that your power belongs to you, not to any god of chaos. Can you do that? Wanda thought of Westview, of the Darkhold, of every time she'd let her power control her instead of the reverse. She thought of Vision's final words. But what is grief, if not love persevering? Her power wasn't evil, her grief wasn't weakness. And she would be damned if she let these entities take away the one thing she had left, her choice. Yes, Wanda said, and meant it. Let's send them a message. The Scarlet Witch and the Inquisitor moved toward the breach together, ready to face the architect of fate itself. The ship screamed around them, reality bent. And in the warp, Tzinch smiled with infinite mouths, delighted by the game to come. The black ship had become a labyrinth of madness. Wanda and Vex moved through corridors that folded back on themselves, their footsteps echoing in directions that shouldn't exist. The walls rippled with eyes that blinked in synchronization, hundreds of them, all watching, all judging. Some grew mouths that whispered fragments of futures that might be, or might never be, or might have already happened in timelines that hadn't yet existed. Don't listen to the voices, Vex commanded, her bolt pistol tracking threats that appeared and disappeared at random. Tzeentch thrives on uncertainty. Every prediction is designed to paralyze you with possibilities. Wanda's hex energy flared, reality stabilizing in a 5-meter bubble around them. The eyes closed, the mouths sealed shut. For a moment, the corridor was just a corridor again. "How long can you maintain that?" Vex asked. "I don't know. Minutes? Hours?" Wanda's hands trembled with effort. "It's fighting me. Whatever's doing this, it's stronger than anything I've ever felt." They rounded a corner and found the breach. A section of the ship's hull had been replaced with pure warp stuff, churning cosmic horror that showed glimpses of impossible libraries filled with infinite knowledge, of creatures that evolved and devolved in microseconds, of timelines branching and collapsing like dying stars. At the center stood a daemon that hurt to perceive directly. It was vaguely humanoid, but its body constantly shifted between forms: bird-like, serpentine, scholarly, predatory. Robes that might have been feathers or flames or living equations flowed around it. Its staff was topped with a screaming face that cycled through every expression simultaneously. A changeling, Wanda's mind supplied, though she didn't know how she knew. A servant of Tzeentch, lesser than a lord of change, but still powerful enough to tear apart reality. "Witch," it spoke in harmonics that made Wanda's teeth ache. "The great conspirator has shown me your futures. 9,999 possible timelines, and in 9,998 of them, you serve the changer of ways." "What about the last one?" Wanda asked, red energy building. "In the last one, you die screaming." The demon's laughter was the sound of breaking glass. "But even that death serves his grand design. You cannot escape fate, Scarlet Witch. Your very existence is a thread in his infinite tapestry." Vex fired. The bolt round exploded against the demon's shifting form, but the creature simply absorbed the detonation, its body rippling like disturbed water. When it solidified, there were 9 copies of the demon where one had stood before. "Change is the only constant," they said in unison. Wanda thrust out her hands, reality rewriting itself. 8 of the 9 demons became probability equations that cancelled each other out, vanishing in puffs of crystalline mathematics. The 9th laughed and split into 27 copies. "You can't fight infinity with subtraction," Vex said grimly. "Tzeentch's servants multiply through paradox. Every time you destroy one, you create the conditions for more." "Then I won't destroy them." Wanda's eyes blazed crimson. "I'll rewrite what they are." She reached deep into her power. Past the carefully controlled hexes, past the reality manipulation she'd learned to weaponize. She touched the fundamental nature of her chaos magic, the ability to say no to existence itself and make it stick. The 27 demons froze mid-multiplication. "What? What are you doing?" "Changing the rules," Wanda said through gritted teeth. Red energy poured from her like blood from a wound. If you're creatures of change, then I'm making you into something that can't change. Something static, fixed, real. The demons screamed as flesh became solid, as infinite possibility collapsed into singular actuality. Their warp-born forms crystallized into glass statues, beautiful, intricate, and utterly mundane. No longer part of Tzeentch's ever-shifting schemes, just objects, mortal, fragile. Wanda shattered them with a thought. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the applause began. It came from everywhere and nowhere, slow, measured clapping that echoed through dimensions. The warp breach pulsed, and a presence emerged, not physically manifesting, but making itself known, vast, ancient, amused beyond measure. Magnificent! The voice was Tzeentch itself, speaking across impossible distances. You reject change by enforcing permanence. You deny fate by creating new constants. You are everything I hoped you would be, Scarlet Witch. I'm nothing like you, Wanda spat. No, you reshape reality to suit your will. You deny the natural order. You impose your singular vision upon the multiverse itself. The presence laughed, and Wanda felt the warp shudder with its mirth. Westview was a masterpiece of control. You rewrote an entire town, made them dance to your desires, all because you refused to accept loss. Tell me, Witch, how is that different from what I do? The words struck harder than any physical blow. Wanda staggered, Vex catching her before she fell. Don't listen, the Inquisitor hissed. It's trying to break you psychologically. But it's right, Wanda whispered. I did that. I hurt those people because I couldn't let go. I'm no better than... You understand. Tzeentch's approval radiated through the breach. Guilt is wisdom. Pain is knowledge. You see the truth now. Your power and mine are siblings, children of the same cosmic principle. Join me, and I will teach you how to wield it without regret, how to reshape entire galaxies without the burden of conscience. That's the difference, Wanda said, finding her voice. She stood straighter, red energy no longer trembling but burning with focused intensity. I feel regret. I carry the weight of what I've done. You offer power without consequence, but I've learned that consequences are what make us human. Human. The word dripped with contempt. Such a limiting concept. Why cling to mortality when godhood awaits? Because gods don't get to be forgiven, Wanda replied. And I still hope for redemption. She raised both hands toward the breach and did something she'd never attempted before. Instead of rewriting reality, she simply closed the door. Her power flowed into the warp tier like sutures pulling a wound shut. Reality reasserting itself not through force, but through gentle insistence that this space belonged to the material universe, not the immaterium. The breach resisted. Tzeentch pushed back with the force of eons. Wanda felt her nose bleeding, felt capillaries bursting in her eyes from the strain, but she held firm. Impressive, but futile. I am infinite, Scarlet Witch. You are merely stubborn enough to tell infinity to go to hell. Wanda smiled through bloody teeth. I've fought gods before. You're not special. With a final surge of power that left her gasping, Wanda sealed the breach. Reality snapped back into place with an audible crack. The demon remnants evaporated. The eyes in the walls closed and didn't reopen. The black ship's geometry returned to something approaching normal. Wanda collapsed. Vex caught her, lowering her gently to the deck. That was... The Inquisitor paused, searching for words. I've seen sanctioned psychers trained for decades who couldn't do what you just did. You denied a Chaos God direct access to this vessel through pure force of will. Did I win? Wanda asked weakly. No. Vex's expression was grim. You survived. That's not the same thing. Tzeentch doesn't lose. He simply adjusts his schemes. Whatever game he's playing, you're still a piece on his board. Then I'll flip the board, Wanda muttered. Vex actually smiled at that. Spoken like a true Inquisitor. She activated her Vox unit. Bridge, this is Vex. Breach contained. Resuming course to... Static answered her. Not normal interference, but something else. Laughter, barely audible beneath the white noise. That's not good, Vex said. The ship shuddered. Not from warp turbulence, but from something physical. Impact. They were being boarded. Vex pulled Wanda to her feet. Can you fight? Do I have a choice? No. The Inquisitor checked her bolt pistol's ammo counter. The chaos cults that worshipped Tzeentch just felt what you did. They'll want to either recruit or kill you before anyone else can claim the prize. We need to reach the armory, get you proper equipment, and... An explosion rocked the corridor behind them. Through the smoke, Wanda saw them. Cultists wearing robes covered in equations that hurt to read. Their skin marked with mutations that defied biology. Some had eyes where eyes shouldn't be. Others had mouths that spoke prophecies in reverse. Leading them was a sorcerer whose very presence distorted light. A servant of Tzeentch, powerful and utterly devoted to claiming Wanda for his god. The witch is ours by divine right, the sorcerer proclaimed, warp lightning crackling between his fingers. The architect has spoken. She will join us, or she will burn. Wanda looked at Vex. The Inquisitor looked back. No words were needed. They charged. The armory of a black ship was designed to hold weapons capable of killing gods. Wanda and Vex fought their way through 3 decks of cultist-infested corridors, leaving a trail of bodies and impossible transformations in their wake. The sorcerer pursuing them was relentless. Every time Wanda rewrote reality to seal a passage, he unraveled her work with contemptuous ease. His mastery of warpcraft was surgical, where hers was instinctive. He's toying with us, Vex said between controlled bursts of bolt fire. A cultist's head exploded in a shower of bone and brain matter, driving us towards something. I know, Wanda gasped, her power flickering. She'd been using her abilities constantly for hours, and even her reality-bending reserves had limits. But we don't have a choice. If we stop, they overwhelm us. They burst through the armory doors, and Vex immediately began entering codes into a weapons locker. Inside were instruments of faith and destruction, blessed bolters, force swords that crackled with psychic energy, grenades sanctified against demonic incursion. "Can you use a weapon?" Vex asked, tossing Wanda a pistol. Wanda caught it awkwardly. "I've used guns before. Just not ones this big." "Point the barrel at the enemy. Pull the trigger. Pray to the Emperor." Vex grabbed a heavy flamer. "Simple!" The cultists poured through the doorway like a tide of corrupted flesh. Vex's flamer roared to life, turning the first wave into screaming torches. Wanda's hex bolts punched through bodies with surgical precision. No wasted movement, no excess power. She was learning to conserve, to fight smart rather than overwhelming. Then the sorcerer entered, and the rules changed. He walked through the Promethean flames as if they were gentle rain, his robes untouched by fire. When he spoke, his voice came from the past and future simultaneously. "Enough games, witch. The architect grows impatient." He raised a hand, and reality inverted. Wanda found herself in a space that wasn't space. A crystalline library that stretched infinitely in all directions. Each crystal contained a moment in time, a possible future, a forgotten past. She saw herself in thousands of configurations, wearing inquisitorial power armor, corrupted into a demon princess, dead on a dozen worlds, triumphant as reality's architect, broken and weeping in eternal isolation. "Behold the paths before you." The sorcerer's voice echoed from everywhere. "Tzeentch offers choice. You need not serve him as a slave. Become his partner. Reshape this galaxy as you once reshaped Westview. Make it better." A crystal floated before her, showing a vision. The Imperium transformed. No more suffering. No more endless war. She saw hive worlds is turned into gardens. The Emperor healed and walking among his people. Space Marines laying down their weapons to become builders instead of destroyers. All the cruelty of the 41st millennium. Undone. "I could do this," Wanda whispered, touching the crystal. "I could fix everything." "At what cost?" Another voice, Vex, somehow present in this impossible space. The Inquisitor appeared beside her, bolt pistol raised. "Show her the rest, sorcerer. Show her what happens after the miracle." The sorcerer's laugh was bitter. "The Inquisitor sees only dogma. I see history," Vex snarled. The Eldar tried to reshape reality to suit their desires. They birthed Slaanesh and doomed their entire species. The Emperor himself sought to perfect humanity and created the heresy that killed trillions. Every time someone with godlike power tries to fix the galaxy, they make it worse. Wanda looked deeper into the crystal. Past the initial paradise, she saw the cracks, reality buckling under the strain of enforced perfection. The warp bleeding through as her power created thin spots in the universe. Demons pouring through by the billions, wearing the faces of the people she'd tried to save. The entire galaxy consumed by the same madness that had destroyed Westview, but on a scale that would dwarf anything the Chaos Gods had ever achieved. "No," Wanda said, dropping the crystal. It shattered, and 1,000 possible futures died. "I won't make that mistake again." "Fool!" The sorcerer's rage shattered the crystalline illusion. Reality snapped back. The armory, The flames, Vex firing her flamer at cultists who'd frozen in place while their master worked his sorcery. You reject salvation out of cowardice. I reject it because I learned from my mistakes, Wanda countered. Red energy blazed around her, brighter than before. Westview taught me that you can't force people to be happy. You can't rewrite reality without consequences. And you sure as hell can't trust anyone who promises paradise without showing you the price tag. The sorcerer's form began to shift, growing larger, more monstrous. His mutations accelerated. Extra eyes, tentacles of living light, mouths that spoke in mathematical proofs. Then you will serve as an example. Tzeentch will break you and remake you as a warning to all who refuse his gifts. He unleashed a torrent of warp lightning that should have atomized Wanda where she stood. Instead, she caught it. Her hands closed around pure chaos energy, red hex power intertwining with the blue-white lightning. For a moment, the two forces struggled. Tzeentchian change versus Wanda's stubborn insistence on her own rules. Then Wanda did what she'd been learning to do since arriving in this nightmare universe. She stopped trying to overpower the warp. She redirected it. The lightning reversed course, flowing back into the sorcerer with doubled intensity. His scream was equal parts rage and ecstasy as his own power consumed him from within. His body erupted into mutations that fed on themselves, a cancerous loop of transformation that couldn't stop, wouldn't stop, until there was nothing left but churning warp stuff. When the light faded, the sorcerer was gone. Only a scorch mark remained. The surviving cultists broke and ran. Vex methodically shot them in the back as they fled. No mercy, no hesitation. When the last one fell, she turned to Wanda. "That was different," the Inquisitor said carefully. "You didn't unmake him. You used his own power against him." "I'm learning," Wanda said, exhausted. "This universe has different rules. I can't fight the warp by denying it exists. I have to redirect it, use its own nature against itself." Dangerous thinking. But Vex's tone held respect. Also brilliant. Most psychers either embrace the warp or resist it absolutely. You're finding a third path. Before Wanda could respond, the ship's Vox system crackled to life. Not with cultist propaganda or demonic voices, but with a clear, authoritative tone. "Attention, Black Ship, designate Midnight's penance. This is Inquisitor Lord Torquemada Koteas of the Ordo Malleus. We have tracked the psychic disturbances to your vessel. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. The psyker designated Scarlet Witch is to be remanded to our custody immediately for interrogation and potential execution." Vex's face went pale. "Koteas, Emperor preserve us," they sent him. "Who is he?" Wanda asked, though she already dreaded the answer. "The greatest demon hunter in the Imperium. He's killed more Chaos Champions than some entire chapters of Space Marines. He's also absolutely ruthless, completely incorruptible. And if he's decided you're a threat..." Vex didn't finish the sentence. "He'll kill me. Without hesitation." Vex looked at Wanda with something that might have been sympathy. "I can try to vouch for you, but Curtiz answers only to the Emperor himself. If he believes you're too dangerous to live, then you die. That's the law." Wanda felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her. She'd fought cultists, banished demons, resisted the temptations of chaos gods themselves, and now the Imperium, the faction that was supposed to be humanity's defenders, wanted her dead too. "There has to be another way," she said. "There isn't." Vex checked her weapons, reloading methodically. "We submit to Curtiz's authority, and you face judgment. Or we run and become hunted by both the Imperium and chaos. Those are the only options." Wanda looked around the armory, at the weapons designed to kill the unkillable, at the blood still steaming on the deck plating. She thought of Billy and Tommy, of Vision, of everyone she'd lost and everything she'd sacrificed. She'd crossed into this universe searching for something she could never have back. But maybe she'd found something else, a purpose, a chance to actually help people instead of imprisoning them in her grief. "I'll face their judgment," Wanda said quietly, "but on my terms. I'll prove I'm not a threat. I'll show them what I can do against chaos, not for it." Vex studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're braver than most, Scarlet Witch, or more foolish. In the 41st millennium, it's hard to tell the difference." The ship shuddered as magnetic clamps locked onto its hull. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, power armor, dozens of sets, moving with military precision. Inquisitor Lord Curtiz was coming, and Wanda Maximoff would face the Imperium's ultimate judgment with her head held high and her power burning like a crimson star. The game had reached its crisis point. Now came the resolution. Inquisitor Lord Torquemada Cortez was a walking monument to humanity's brutal pragmatism. He entered the armory flanked by a squad of Grey Knights, space marines whose very existence was classified, their armor inscribed with wardses that made Wanda's eyes water to look at directly. Curtiz himself was ancient, his power armor covered in purity seals and devotional scripture accumulated over centuries of demon hunting. His face was scarred beyond recognition, one eye replaced with an augmetic that glowed with cold blue light. In his hand, he carried a demon hammer that radiated such concentrated faith that Wanda could feel it pressing against her power like a physical weight. "Inquisitor Vex," Curtiz's voice was a mechanized rasp. "You were ordered to terminate any unsanctioned psyker upon discovery. Yet you bring this anomaly aboard an inquisitorial vessel and allow it to contaminate the ship with warp phenomena." His augmetic eye focused on Wanda. "Explain yourself." Vex stood at attention, though Wanda could see the tension in her shoulders. "Lord Inquisitor, this psyker is not native to our reality. Her capabilities are unprecedented, but she has demonstrated resistance to chaos corruption and actively fought against. Resistance is irrelevant." Curtiz's hammer struck the deck with a sound like a death knell. "All psykers are potential doorways for demonic incursion. The stronger the psyker, the greater the danger. This Scarlet Witch has caused multiple warp breaches, attracted the direct attention of Tzeentch himself, and demonstrated reality-warping capabilities that rival a demon primarch. He pointed the hammer at Wanda. She is an extinction-level threat that must be neutralized immediately. Then do it, Wanda said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. If you're going to kill me, at least have the courage to look me in the eye while you do it. Curtiz's scarred face might have shown surprise, or amusement, or nothing at all. You do not fear death. I've died before, Wanda said, thinking of the snap, of Thanos, of the countless times she'd wished for oblivion. I've been erased from existence and brought back. Death doesn't scare me anymore. What scares me is becoming the monster everyone thinks I am. The Grey Knights shifted, weapons tracking her minutely, but Curtiz raised a hand. Fascinating. Most psychers beg for their lives at this juncture. You invite execution. I invite judgment, Wanda corrected. There's a difference. I've made mistakes, terrible ones. But I've also fought against the chaos gods you're sworn to destroy. I've denied their corruption, banished their servants, and closed breaches into your warp. If that earns me execution, fine. But at least acknowledge what I've done. Curtiz studied her in silence for a long moment. Then, to Vex's visible shock, he deactivated his demon hammer and mag-locked it to his armor. Tell me everything, he commanded. From the beginning. Leave nothing out. So Wanda did. She told him about the Mind Stone, about Sokovia and Ultron, about Vision's death and the creation of Westview, about the Darkhold's corruption and her desperate search for her children across realities. She told him about arriving in the 41st millennium, about the demons and cultists and the constant whispers from the warp. And she told him about her choice, again and again, to resist. When she finished, Curtiz was silent. The Grey Knights remained motionless, statues of ceramite and faith. Vex looked like she was holding her breath. You are aware, Curtiz said finally, that your story changes nothing. The Imperium has no mechanism for rehabilitation of unsanctioned psychers. Our laws are absolute for good reason. Mercy creates vulnerabilities that chaos exploits. I know, Wanda said, but I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for a chance to prove my worth. Let me fight for you. Use me as a weapon against chaos. If I fail, if I show even the slightest sign of corruption, then execute me. But let me earn redemption through service. Unprecedented, one of the Grey Knights muttered. Curtiz silenced him with a glance. The Grey Knights are correct. What you propose violates every protocol. And yet, he turned to Vex. Your assessment, Inquisitor? Vex straightened. Lord Inquisitor, in my professional opinion, the Scarlet Witch represents the single most dangerous uncontrolled psyker I have ever encountered. Her power eclipses even Alpha Plus level designations. She paused. She is also the only psyker I have ever seen who deliberately limits her own power out of fear of causing harm. That self-restraint is worth considering. Self-restraint can be overcome, Curtiz said. Grief, rage, desperation, any of these could break her control. Yes, Vex agreed, which is why I propose a compromise. a psychic binding, a leash, if you will. The Ordo Malleus has developed neural limiters that can suppress psyker abilities remotely, fitted to the Scarlet Witch. Such a device would allow us to terminate her powers and her at the first sign of corruption. Wanda felt her stomach drop. You want to put a kill switch in my brain. I want to give you the chance you asked for, Vex said, meeting her eyes. But the Imperium doesn't do trust. It does contingencies. This is the only way Koteas might authorize. The Inquisitor Lord considered, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on Wanda. The device would be painful to install. It would monitor your thoughts constantly, searching for signs of demonic taint. Any attempt to remove it would result in immediate neural cascade, death within seconds. And if you are ever deemed compromised, I will personally trigger the termination sequence without hesitation. So I get to live as a prisoner in my own head, Wanda said bitterly. You get to live, Cotes replied, and fight, and perhaps earn a place in the Imperium's endless war. It is more than any unsanctioned psyker has ever been offered. Wanda thought about the alternative. Execution right here, right now. At least with the neural limiter, she'd have a chance. A chance to fight chaos, to protect people, to maybe find a way home eventually. It wasn't freedom, but in the 41st millennium, freedom was an illusion anyway. One condition, she said. I want autonomy in how I fight. No forcing me to torture innocents, no ordering me to commit atrocities in the Emperor's name. I'll fight your enemies, but I do it my way. Your way has destroyed cities, Cotes observed. And your way has destroyed entire worlds, Wanda countered. At least I feel guilty about it. For the first time, Cotes smiled, a terrible expression on his scarred face. I am beginning to understand why Tzeentch wants you so badly. You are chaos incarnate, wrapped in moral conviction. Very well, Scarlet Witch. I accept your terms, with modifications. You will fight under Inquisitor Vex's direct command. She will be responsible for your actions and your loyalty. Should you fall to corruption, she dies alongside you. Agreed? Vex's eyes widened, but she nodded without hesitation. Wanda looked at the Inquisitor who'd given her a chance when she could have executed her, who'd listened when she could have condemned, who was now willingly binding her fate to Wanda's own. Agreed, Wanda said. The neural limiter installation took 6 hours and hurt more than anything Wanda had experienced, and she'd been disintegrated by the Infinity Stones. Tech priests drilled into her skull with surgical precision, implanting a device that would monitor her psychic signature for the rest of her life. When it was done, Wanda stood before a mirror in the Medici Bay, looking at the small port at the base of her skull where the limiter connected to her nervous system. She could feel it there, a foreign presence in her mind, watching and waiting. Vex entered, carrying a bundle. Your new uniform, she said, unfolding it. Sanctioned psyker designation, modified for combat operations. The symbol is the inquisitorial eye. You serve the Emperor now, whether you believe in him or not. Wanda took the uniform, black and red, surprisingly similar to her old Scarlet Witch costume but marked with imperial iconography. "What happens now?" "Now we hunt," Vex said simply. "There's a Tsinchian cult on the world of Mordia that's been sacrificing entire regiments to fuel a summoning ritual. They're trying to open a permanent warp rift that would consume the entire system. We're going to stop them. And if I succeed, then you live another day, and another, and another." Vex's expression softened fractionally. "Welcome to the Inquisition, Scarlet Witch. May the Emperor protect you, because nothing else will." Wanda donned the uniform, feeling the weight of her new chains and her new purpose settle across her shoulders. She wasn't free. She might never be free again. But she was alive, and she was fighting for something beyond her own grief. In the 41st millennium, that was as close to redemption as anyone got. 3 months after her binding, Wanda Maximoff stood on the command deck of Vex's personal frigate, watching a world burn. Mordia had been saved, but at a cost measured in millions of lives. The Tsinchian cult had been eradicated, their summoning ritual disrupted by Wanda's reality manipulation, working in concert with Grey Knight strike forces. But the fighting had scarred the planet's surface, left entire hive cities as smoking craters. The Imperium called it victory. Wanda called it a nightmare with a body count. She'd stopped 5 more chaos incursions since then. Each time, the neural limiter had remained silent. No corruption detected, no demonic taint found. Each time, Wanda had proven herself, and each time, she'd felt a little more of her soul wearing away under the weight of the 41st millennium's brutality. "You're thinking about going home," Vex said, joining her at the viewport. The Inquisitor had become something unexpected over the past months, a friend, or as close to one as existed in the Inquisition. "Every day," Wanda admitted. "But I don't know if there's anything left to go home to. Vision is dead. Billy and Tommy were never real. The Avengers probably think I'm dead or worse." She touched the neural limiter port at the base of her skull. "Maybe this is where I belong now." "The Imperium doesn't deserve you," Vex said quietly. "But it needs you. Every demon you banish, every cult you destroy, that's millions of lives saved from corruption and worse. You're making a difference, Wanda. A real one. By becoming a weapon. By being a protector." Vex handed her a data slate. "We've received reports of unusual psychic phenomena in the segmentum obscurus. Reality distortions similar to your signature, but different, darker. The Ordo Malleus believes someone is trying to replicate your abilities." Wanda studied the report, feeling that familiar pull, the need to fix things, to stop threats before they consumed innocence. She was still the Scarlet Witch, even here in this grim, dark future. Still trying to save people, even if the methods were brutal and the victories Pyrrhic. "When do we leave?" she asked. Vex smiled grimly. "Immediately. The Emperor protects Scarlet Witch." "Does he?" Wanda looked out at the stars, a billion lights in an ocean of darkness. Somewhere out there, the Chaos Gods were watching, waiting for her to slip. The Imperium held her leash though, ready to kill her at the first sign of weakness. And yet, she would keep fighting, keep resisting, Keep choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Because in the end, that was all anyone could do. Choose. Again and again, in the face of impossible odds and inevitable corruption. Choose to be better than the monsters. Wanda Maximoff had been many things: avenger, villain, grieving mother, reality warper. Now she was something new, a weapon against the darkness, a witch who said no to gods and meant it, a fragment of hope in a universe that had forgotten the word. The neural limiter hummed at the base of her skull. The warp whispered promises of power and freedom. And Wanda Maximoff told them both the same thing she'd been saying since she arrived. Not today. The Emperor protects. More stories await. If you enjoyed the ride through the Grimdark, feel free to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and turn on notifications. You'll get an alert every day at 6 p.m. EST when new stories drop. Your support helps keep these tales alive in a universe where hope is in short supply.